Welcome back to another midweek service. It is not Wednesday night. There are not students in here. This is actually Thursday morning because I only have 17 minutes of last night's sermon. And so I decided to come back up here and video it again for you guys on YouTube so that you can just kind of have a bit of content. And for the most part, I'm going to just jump right in, dive right in. So we are in our Gathering Virtues series, which is the Book of Ruth. I call it the Hallmark movie of the Bible, okay? This is week 3 of 4, okay? So we are almost done with this series. I've really enjoyed this series because of how much the topic of racism has actually come up. But this was not something that I was actually thinking through. This is not something I was prepared to go through. But when I began to think through the series that I wanted to preach months ago, I was actually going to be going through a different topic and was just really struggling through what I would be doing, what I would be preaching through, and all the ones that I was supposed to be preaching through just felt uncomfortable. And so God led me to Ruth, because Ruth really has to do a lot more with the character of the individuals than the love story. And so I thought, we'll do that. But then, because she's the Moabite woman, it has really brought up this topic a lot more. And I really enjoyed the fact that we've gotten to discuss it and discuss godly perspectives on racism, which we're going to talk about some more here in a second, but also just the biblical response to those who are racist or those who have even used racism to further their own agendas on both sides of that. So what we've got is we've got this woman who grew up Moabite. She looks Moabite, she acts Moabite, her language is probably Moabite or something very similar. And here she is now in Israel because this foreign family of Israelites, Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their kids, Chilion and Mahlon, moved to Moab because of a famine. For 10 years they kind of raised there, and both the sons married Moabite women. So she has to learn a new language or how to interact with this new family. She has to learn new culture. She learns new family heritage. And because they are Israelites, they also she learns of this new God. And the Moabite gods were awful, pagan. They did despicable things that we would, as Christians, say are incredibly just morally wrong. And so she actually ends up rejecting that faith in order to marry her husband, Mahlon. And when she did that, she somewhat left her family behind, had to leave her family behind. And so then now that her husband's dead, and all she has is this mother-in-law who's going back to her homeland, Ruth is caught in this weird tension because her family won't take her back, very likely. But if she goes to Israel, they won't accept her either because, again, she's a Moabite. And so she has to make this decision, and her decision is to trust and follow God, not go back to her own gods, the little false gods. And so it's been an amazing study. We're going to see tonight where Ruth begins to see a change in how people treat her. In the first 2 chapters, they just keep referring to her as the Moabite woman. They're going to keep doing that actually through the 3rd chapter. It's not until the 4th chapter that an Israelite finally calls her by her name, actually says Ruth's name out loud. And I want to ask the question, what does it mean to follow Jesus? And can your race keep you from that, or your opinions on race keep you from that? So, if you remember from last week, Ruth has been working in Boaz's fields. And again, it's kind of like their welfare system for those who are poor. So the people who had the field would harvest the middle of the field, but they would leave a little thin edge all the way around. So the poor people, didn't just get free handouts. They had to go and actually work and harvest the grain that was in the edge. Now, the best grain was always in the middle of the field. The outside of the field was where there would be the most thistles, weeds, things like that. And so she's kind of getting the leftovers, but hey, it's better than starving. And so she goes out there into the fields, and this is extra risky for her because now you've got this Moabite woman venturing out into fields that belong to Israelites. And other Israelites are out there working the fields. Other Israelite women and men are working the fields. But they let her, because at least, those people are nice enough that they'll let this woman out there in their field. But then when Boaz shows up, who's the owner of the field, Boaz is inclined towards helping Ruth. One, because Ruth is the daughter-in-law, although she's a Moabite, daughter-in-law of Naomi, his relative, and she is taking care of that. Another really good, interesting thing that I want to bring up is Boaz is actually the son of a woman named Rahab. And Rahab was actually not a Israelite either. She was a Canaanite from Jericho. And because Boaz had experienced what that may have been like for this Canaanite woman who converted to Israel's faith, converted to believing in Yahweh, and saw what that meant for his mom, he was probably more inclined to be favorable to Ruth than anybody else. So, Naomi stays home, and Ruth has been out gleaning in the fields, harvesting, and I think what's important is that we begin to see that this week Boaz is going to kind of begin to flirt with her. He's going to be like, hey, leave some extra grain. Hey, leave the really good grain. The sheaves that you have collected from the middle of the field, drop those behind. And so we're going to see what that means for her. But I think what's really important is that Scripture never really tells us how pretty Ruth is. Like, is she beautiful? Is she not beautiful? Now, the Bible has language for that, okay? Because it talks about Jacob who married Rachel and Leah, okay? And so Rachel was beautiful, it says very beautiful, and it says that Jacob loved her. But then it says about Leah that she had weak eyes, which is Bible language for saying like she was weak on the eyes, okay? Like she was not a bunch of eye candy like Rachel was. And so there's biblical language for saying that someone is pretty and then someone is not very pretty. But it actually never says that about Ruth. So we don't know if she has the face of a goddess or the face of a camel, okay? So like they never really address that. They address her character. And I think it's really important that Boaz is mostly intrigued by her character, by how she conducts herself, by how she carries herself among the others. So I think it's important to know that Boaz probably did at least think that she was pretty, because you're not going to flirt with somebody that you're not physically attracted to. But real quick, I want to talk about what it means as far as pretty goes, because in our culture we have dramatically changed that, really in the last 100 years. Like 100 years ago, we were still very much an agricultural society, and so women wanted to have pasty white skin. Because if you had tan skin, that means you weren't very well off and you had to work out in the fields. And so like the farmer's daughter kind of concept was like a demeaning statement to them. So the well-to-do people, they did not want tans because that meant I stayed inside. I didn't have to work outside. So there's one thing where beauty has dramatically changed. The other thing is even 50, 60 years ago, you would not have seen women walking around in their super tight yoga pants or workout pants or something like that, showing off how muscular they are. Because again, that's not what beauty was. Beauty for women was they were soft, they were gentle, they were kind. Now it's, hey, let me show you my rippling muscles where I just did 1,000 squats today or something ridiculous. And there's become this body worship in a way that I think is actually to the detriment of women, because now it takes a lot more work to be pretty. It takes a lot more self-reflection, literally looking in the mirror and saying, am I pretty or not? And I think this is to the detriment of our girls, because now you're constantly pursuing this ridiculous Barbie doll standard of beauty that really is virtually unattainable for the vast majority of women. And so a lot of girls, even if they are beautiful young women, now feel like they can never be pretty. And I think it's more important, again, scripturally, to remember that beauty is fleeting and youth does not last. We're all eventually going to end up old. That just happens. And so you can only be a model for so long. That job has a shelf life, kind of like a football player. Like some can do it a little longer than others, but eventually the body just gives out and can't keep doing it. So I would encourage you, focus more on your character, focus more on who you are. Now, take baths, put on deodorant, brush your hair. Okay, some things about beauty are okay, but if you do it to the excess, you may do it to the detriment of your character. So I would highly encourage you, don't do that, especially girls. Because again, Proverbs 31 says, charm is deceptive and beauty does not last, but a woman who fears the Lord will be greatly praised. So focus on your faith, focus on your character. So with all that in mind, let's jump into Ruth 3. Okay, and we're going to go through the first chunk and then kind of take a pause and finish out the last. So, here we go. With all of that in mind, let's go through that piece. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, why should I not seek rest for you that it may be well with you? Sorry, that it may be well with you. Is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." Don't worry, we're going to come back to that. That's super weird. And she replied, "All that you say, I will do." So when she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her, and when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. I love that, like tiptoes sneaking in all stealthy. All right. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Okay, we're going to come back to what that means as well. And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after younger men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, "Let it not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Bring the garment you were wearing and hold it out." So she held it out, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went to the city, and when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "How did you fare, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, and for he said to me, 'You must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how this matter turns out, for the man will not rest until, but will settle the matter today." Okay, so first off, she's going to take an opportunity here. It's kind of interesting, but Ruth is going to reveal her intentions in a really weird way. So first off, she uncovers his legs. Let's just talk about that weird part. So literally, she goes up to his cloak and uncovers not his feet, although some translations say that it actually means his legs. Okay, and so, but what we think of, that sounds suggestive or weird, but it's not. The word for cloak here is more like the outer garment. In that area of the world, it has very hot days and then has very cold nights. It's not a tropical climate where it has water to kind of regulate its temperature. So what you would do is have an outer garment that went over your normal clothes, just like kind of like a coat or something like that, but it was really a robe that went all the way from shoulders to feet and would cover your feet. And so if you were out at night, you would wear that so that you could sleep outside without getting cold. So earlier, where Naomi even says wash, which is good because she's been out in the field working all day, she probably stinks a little bit. So wash and then put on your cloak. And so it's not like your pretty little black dress or anything fancy. It's just a normal outer cloak. And so put on your cloak because it's going to be cold where you're going, okay? Now another thing that's important about what Ruth is doing is that outer garment was just a standard outer garment. She was likely in a time of mourning, and in their culture that would last much longer. For us, we understand it, but we only do it for a day. right? We all wear black for one day, the day of the funeral, and the next day it's like, hey, back to normal. For them, they would go months wearing the black, and so very likely Ruth has been wearing this dark color even out while she was in the fields because she was still in her period of mourning. So the fact that she washes, she changes clothes into her normal clothes, non-mourning clothes, what she's saying now to the guys who are watching her, hey, I'm available. I am no longer in mourning, because that was the purpose of the mourning for the widow. The widow was saying, don't talk to me, I'm still mourning my previous husband. And sometimes we do that, like you'll see someone who's just lost their wife or has lost her husband or something like that, and she'll keep wearing her wedding ring months after he's passed. And that's kind of like a statement like, hey, I'm not ready to move on. But again, they will sometimes remove it, sometimes not, but that's their way of saying, hey, I'm ready to move on, or something like that. So you've got Ruth who's ready to move on, and you've got Boaz, he's out at the threshing floor. Now, he's been working all day. He's been working hard, okay? So the threshing floor is where you would throw up the grain, the chaff would get blown away, and the little kernels would come back down, and so you had a nice little flat, clean floor that would catch it all, and then you'd mound it up. But you wouldn't just leave it there at the end of the night, because someone would come in and steal all your grain. So the guys would generally stay out there at the grain to keep watch over it, so no one would come and steal it, okay? And again, there's these arguments that believe that like Boaz was like 80 years old. I don't think so, because no 80-year-old man is going to be sitting out there on a pile of grain, sleeping. For one, he's going to be hurting just be out there, because he was out there working in the field all day. Again, not typical of an 80-year-old man. And no one's going to be scared about stealing grain from an 80-year-old man. Okay, so again, I think Boaz is a little younger than at least 80. So in the middle of the night, she sneaks out in the dark, uncovers his feet. Then, of course, he gets cold, wakes up, and he's like, oh, man. So he kind of fixes himself, turns over, and oh, no, there's a woman. And that was not necessarily uncommon, but it kind of was, because generally the guys were out there, the women had all gone back in. So if a woman was out there, she was probably like a bad lady who was propositioning him. And so that was kind of a bad moment for Boaz, because again, Boaz is a worthy man, a man of great character. It defines him at the beginning of 2 that he is a worthy man, or a mighty man is actually that word there. And so this is kind of risky for Ruth, because he could have just sent her on her way thinking, oh no, here's this, I thought she was a nice woman, but now she's not. So it's a little risky to her character. Another thing is, it's a little risky because here she is, a Moabite woman, propositioning Boaz. Now, if she had propositioned any other Israelite man, that Israelite man probably would have said no. Actually, next week we're going to see where another Israelite man is kind of propositioned. And so, but again, Boaz's mother, Rahab, Canaanite woman, Boaz doesn't have problems with that, because he already is from a biracial marriage. And so what he's affirming in Ruth whenever he responds kindly to her is that he is much more interested in her character and in her faith, and she probably is beautiful, much more interested in those things than what race she is, what color she is. And truthfully, that's exactly how God responds to all of us, right? The gospel is not for just white people, or just black people, or just Latino people. The gospel is for all people. That's why in Revelation 9, it actually refers to this great multitude of every tribe, nation, tongue, and language. All right, all these different people are there declaring the worth of Christ. Why? Because that's the design of the future. That's the design of our heaven, to know that God is there and God is present in each person. So again, to say racism is actually totally counter to the Bible, because there truthfully is only one race, the human race, because we all came from one individual person. Actually, biologically, they've kind of proven that. And so they can prove that we've all come at least from, you could say Adam and Eve, which is true, but really it's Noah and his wife. We all have a common ancestor. All of us go back to one. Because again, there's only one race. There's just multiple cultures, multiple ethnicities, and the genetic pool of humanity is massive. Okay, so it's not that we're better than some other race, like we all evolved at different times and we're more evolved than they are, or something like that, which is what used to be believed. That's the 1800s, and the whole concept of evolution and racism was built on this idea that white people were more evolved or something like that than other races. That's simply not true. According to the Bible, all are equal before the Lord. So, sometimes God calls you to maybe make an act of obedience. And maybe it's uncomfortable because of a racist issue or because of a money issue. Really, the new racism, if you will, is more about the haves and the have-nots, the wealthy and the unwealthy. And can I say this just kind of real rich in this area? And so Ruth has to trust God, trust Naomi and trust God that everything will be okay in the situation. And can you just imagine how she feels as she's sneaking out at night? This is totally out of character for her. This is something that she would never really do. And she's probably telling herself, like, I hope this works. This is kind of like a bad idea. But, again, her reputation preceded her. So, next observation, which is amazing. In verse 11, Boaz makes a comment about her. He says, all my townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. This word here is the exact same word that is made of Boaz in 2:1. So, it's literally translated, you are a mighty woman, or a woman of exceedingly great character. I think it's really important to notice that the mighty woman is interested in the mighty man, and the mighty man is really interested in the mighty woman. I find that really important, because here's the thing, if you truly are a person of really great and amazing character, you're only going to be interested in other people who are truly great and amazing in their character. You should not be interested in someone who has poor character, who has poor taste, who's not, dignified or honorable in how they live. So not only was she that mighty woman, and Boaz realized that about her, but he even says, all the townsmen know that you are a mighty woman, or a worthy woman of character. And so her reputation had preceded her. Other people in the community, even though she'd only been there for a few months, they'd seen how she had carried herself, how she had acted and conducted her life, how she had served Naomi selflessly, even when she had not needed to, and they had seen her demonstrate her faith. And so again, the whole town, the whole community is honoring her and her character. And so students, can I just get real with you for a minute? You have a reputation, and that reputation precedes you. Now there's two reputations that you really need to think about. There's the reputation with your friends, and there's the reputation with other, we'll call them mighty people or people of character. Let me give you an example. The funny kid that all the students like, okay, the funny kid, the guy who can crack jokes every minute, all right, he's the funny kid. All right, to the adults, they might view him as unable to be serious, irresponsible, disrespectful when they're teaching. See how that's a different reputation? Think of it more from a position of, okay, if I want to have exceedingly great character, how would those with great character perceive me? Live in that way. Focus on the second reputation more than the first reputation, because the funny kid, whenever he no longer has a group, really has no reputation, does he? Or the kid who is super smart or something like that, has book smarts, okay? But again, how you conduct yourself, that's really going to matter more. You're not going to get the opportunities if you have terrible character, even if you are really smart. So, the kids who are kind of laid back and are really good at gaming or something like that, adults generally kind of think of that kid as somewhat lazy because all he's interested in games and not really accomplishing much. Think about your reputation, guys. Girls, think about your reputation. How do you want to be known? Third, let's talk about how her patience prepared her. And this is the scary part. So she presents herself to Boaz. She says, cover me with your wings. And essentially, she's petitioning him to marry her. Now, one, that's not very normal. A woman would generally not propose to the man, except in the case of a widow who's wanting to be redeemed. And so, here she is. She's got Boaz, who's a single man and has a wonderful character, and she's going to propose to him to be her redeemer. Well, then he lets her in on this terrible news. Yes, I am a redeemer, but there's actually another redeemer, and in their culture, he had priority over Boaz. So imagine this, okay? Ruth sets this all in motion, Naomi didn't mention anything about this other guy, and now she's like, oh no, I might end up married to some other guy that I'm not really prepared to be married to. I don't know who he is. I don't know his character. And so now she has to go home, and she's probably thinking all these things like, what if he's terrible? What if this doesn't work? What if Boaz doesn't marry me? What if everything seems to fall apart? And there's this fear. You know, a lot of times when I have to obey the Lord, I run into these what if moments, and I begin to think about all the worst case scenarios. I don't ever go to the positive. Maybe you go to the positive. Maybe you're that optimist kind of person. I'm more the realist, and I can see all the ways that this can go wrong. And so kind of in a fearful moment, I begin to doubt God. Okay, how's this going to go? And I'm not very patient about it. I want to know like results now. I want things done yesterday. The last thing I am as a patient man. But here we go. You see Ruth goes back and kind of patiently awaits what the Lord is going to do. Sometimes that's what life is like, especially for students. You're not an adult yet, so you don't get to make your own decisions. Many of you, actually most of you, all of you, cannot drive and have any autonomy or anything like that. And so you're in this growing phase, maturing phase, and you're also in this waiting phase. You're waiting for your opportunity. And so I would highly encourage you, just be faithful to the Lord, trust Him, make decisions that honor Him, and when that waiting time is over, you'll have your opportunity. So now let me kind of wrap everything up. Again, Boaz and Ruth are focused on their character and even the character of the other individual more than looks, than wealth even. All of that is not even really mentioned. It all has to do more with the character of that individual. And the words that I really want to focus back in on are worthy or mighty. Boaz and Ruth. Student, let me encourage you, focus in on that a lot more. Let God develop your faith and thus develop your character more than your TikTok stream, how many people are following you, how many videos you're able to churn out, how popular you are, because honestly popularity ebbs and flows, and you might be popular today and unpopular the next week. Don't worry about those things. Instead, worry about the characteristics that last. Your character, and whether you are a person with exceedingly good character or if you have bad character. Your decisions are the reflections of your character. They define your character. Now, your character should be defined in Christ because being leads to doing. Your doing flows from your being. It's not the other way around. We think that we are what we do. That's not true. You do what you are. Okay? So if you're doing bad things, it's because you're a bad person. If you're doing good things, it's because you're a good person. Seek then to be a good, godly person who pursues the Lord. And all the other things will flow out of that. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys next time.